And I'm Aradhika, and we are your hosts for this Military Literature Festival, of the fifth edition of the Military Literature Festival 2021.
To give you the brief background and history of Military Literature Festival, this highly successful event was the brainchild of His Excellency, the Governor of Punjab and the Chief Minister of Punjab. And the Honorable, thus the MLF, the country's first MLF came into being as a joint venture by the Punjab Government, Chandigarh administration and Headquarter Western Command. The inaugural Military Lit Fest was held in November 27 at the iconic Sukna Lake, Chandigarh, and is now an unmissable yearly fixture. There is a variety on offer, from stories of bravery, raw courage and exercise of Indian soldier down the ages to incisive peeps into military history. There are rich accounts and analysis of the security and strategic situation around us by eminent personalities and experts, both of national and international repute. In short, the Military Literature Festival Association does it all with aplomb.
In the backdrop of the golden jubilee of India's stupendous victory during the 1971 war with Pakistan, which resulted in the liberation of the East Pakistan and the formation of Bangladesh, this fifth edition is primarily dedicated to the 1971 operations. Today, tomorrow, and then again on the 18th and the 19th of December, we will navigate you through some incredible and unfiltered stories by the war veterans of 1971. We also have on platter several rich and visionary discussions on the burning security issues in our neighborhood, which have a bearing on the international strategic balance.
We will now commence with the opening ceremony. Shri Banwari Lal Purohit, Honorable Governor of Punjab and Administrator of Chandigarh, is a senior political personality having shaped public affairs
N.K. Khanduri, General Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Western Command, is the first air defense officer to be appointed as an army commander. In a career spanning over 38 years, General Khanduri has served across a wide spectrum of operational areas and has held a host of important command, staff, and instructional appointments. He commanded an air defense brigade in Operation Rakshak and a mountain brigade in Operation Falcon, an infantry division on the Western Front, and a corps in the Eastern Theatre.
Honorable Governor of Punjab, Shri Banwari Lal Purohit, Chief Minister of Punjab, Shri Charanjit Singh Channi, veterans, colleagues in defence services, and distinguished participants. It's indeed a privilege for me to be giving out the opening remarks for the Military Literature Festival 2021. Since its commencement in 2017, it has generated a great amount of interest and awareness in the environment and especially amongst the youth of our rich military heritage, culture, and all over global security issues. Exemplified military domain, shaping of the international environment with radical integration amongst the services, bold execution of plans, leadership, and not the least, the valor of our officers and troops in conjunction with the Mukti Yoddhas. Thus, it's indeed befitting for the Military-led Festival in 2021 to draw inspiration from the 1971 victory, wherein we'll get to hear the first-hand accounts of our war veterans who were the actual arbiters of this great feat. I also take this opportunity to remember and pay homage to our gallant soldiers who made the supreme sacrifice in service of the nation. Their sacrifice will always inspire and motivate us to give our best in all endeavors. With that, I, on behalf of the Western Command fraternity, wish the Military Lit Festival a grand success. While it would have been great to be present in person and participate, but COVID protocols have led us to the virtual format, which in itself is unique in its construct and concept. My best wishes to all the participants for active participation and discussions. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Shri N.N. Vora, Padma Vibhushan, was formerly the Governor of J&K. He has also served as Defence Secretary, Home Secretary, Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, Co-Chairman of India-EU Roundtable, Chairman of the National Task Force on Internal Security, and member National Security Advisory Board. He is presently the Chairman of the Tribune Trust.
Honorable Governor Punjab, Shri Purohit, Honorable Chief Minister Punjab, Shri Channi, Western Army Commander, General Khanduri, and the Chairperson of the Military Literary Festival Association, General Shergill. First of all, I would like to express my sincere condolences on the very sad and tragic passing away of General Bipin Rawat, his lady wife, and several other officers and servicemen. I had the pleasure of knowing General Rawat for very many years, and then he served as a divisional commander in the valley for 2 years when I was also serving in Kashmir. Later on, he became the Chief of Staff of the Indian Army, and I had very close consultations with him several times a month on occasions which were causing anxiety to national security. I am very happy to be once again associated with the 5th edition of the Military Literary Festival, which, as in the past, attracts a large number of serving and retired officers and men. The pattern of the festival has been broadly the same from its inception. They talk about remember, pay homage to the heroes who protected and safeguarded our country and sacrificed their lives for the nation. Talk about the past battles, past wars, and then focus on the present, the current threats to the nation from the land, sea, and air frontiers. And this involves sometimes discussion on books, on military matters, and war histories written by some defense services officers. Yet another element of the festival focuses on the developments in the geopolitics of the region, the emerging threats, and what India as a nation and what our military needs to do to prepare for future contingencies. And as I said earlier, a fourth component of the festival, which is serious discussions on some meaningful books which relate to military, defense, war, strategy, and so on. This time around, it happens that we are also celebrating the 50th year, the Golden Jubilee of the 1971 war. I hope that this particular festival will also be as successful, if not more, than the previous editions of this festival and contribute to current thought and future thinking about the future of warfare, the kind of threats which are emerging in our region and beyond, and how our defense services require to remain prepared to meet various arising contingencies. A war is a deadly business. It's a question of life and death. It's a question of honor of countries and of officers and men who fight for their country, for the security and the integrity and unity of their country. So I would take this opportunity of complimenting General Shergill for organizing this festival as in the past and wish great success to all the events which have been planned to be done in this festival. Thank you very much.
Lieutenant General T.S. Shergill, Chairman, Military Literature Festival Association, has a distinguished army and civilian service track record. He commanded a division in J&K and a corps in the Northeast, both in counter-insurgency environments. He was also Commandant of the IMA. Earlier, he served as Defense Attaché to the United States of America and the Indian High Commission, Canada. On retirement from the Army, he was appointed Chairman of the PPSC and served as Senior Advisor to the CM Punjab. General Shergill is the Founder Chairman of the Military Literature Festival Association. Lieutenant General T.S. Shergill.
Ladies, gentlemen, and children, I welcome you to the 5th edition of the Military Literature Festival that is held at Chandigarh for all of India. This is the 5th edition. However, this is the second virtual edition caused by the pandemic. I'm afraid we can't do for you what we did in the first three festivals, which was both a carnival and a literature festival. However, I do hope that through the virtual medium, we'll be able to reach many more people across the globe who could enjoy this particular literature festival, which is military in nature. I wish to thank the people who have made this possible. And first of all, His Excellency the Governor, Shri Banwari Lal Purohit, Governor of Punjab, the Honorable Chief Minister of Punjab, Sardar Charanjit Singh Channi, the General Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Western Command, Lieutenant General N.K. Khanduri, and of course, our media partner, the Tribune, through the kind cooperation of Shri N.N. Vora, who is the President of the Tribune Trust. I thank them all for being with us from the start of this venture 5 years ago. And I hope this will continue into the future. Now, there was a different nature of conflict, both in the West and in the East, 50 years ago. And it is that, in large part, that we are going to celebrate in this particular edition of the Military Literature Festival. In 1971, the Indo-Pak conflict that took place actually took place over several months. There were months of preparation. There were months of shaping the battle and shaping the nation, as it were, and finally, the conflict itself. To the east, the nature of the country was totally different from that of the West. In the East, there were mighty rivers, and even the communications were so difficult. For example, even if Lieutenant General Niazi, who was commanding in the Eastern Theatre from Pakistan, had to move troops away from what they referred to as Fort Dhaka to any of the outposts, it would take as much as 36 hours. Many of the roads that ran across the country were on high embankments, and the land on either side was very soft and boggy, making cross-country movement all that more difficult. There were only two principal bridges across two of the rivers. And so, in fact, the entire terrain was divided into 4 sectors. But all those sectors and the rivers eventually flowed down to Dhaka. And of course they would, because from time immemorial, cities, towns, villages have sprung up along banks of rivers and streams. To the west, there were the high mountains, high altitude, at the highest point going up to 18,000, 20,000 feet, and then down through mountains and then hills and onto the plains and further south into the desert, the Thar. And so these were two different theaters, as it were, of operations. But in them, the officers and the soldiers remained the same, whether they were from India or they were from Pakistan. Valor, courage is all the same across continents, across communities, across religions. And at the end of a war, there's always a salute to valor, be it from any side of the battle. What happened here was a different kind of courage that was shown, not merely by the people in active combat, but also by those commanding at the highest level, the generals and of the political class. Amongst the generals, we can certainly say that the then General Manekshaw, later Field Marshal, showed an entirely different grip of the situation. And he had the capacity not only to have the loyalty and the fealty of his armed forces, but also the confidence of the politicals above him. And I think that helped a great deal for victory in the East. At the same time, we had as a political head Mrs. Indira Gandhi, our Prime Minister. And she is the one who actually shaped the political battle, carrying it out, all her efforts into different countries to convince them of this great ordeal that had befallen India, with 10 million refugees coming into India, and also to the people of East Pakistan. It's well known that East Pakistan and its people did not want a different country, but they wanted equality, they wanted justice, they wanted political justice. And when it was denied them, and all their efforts put down in a very violent manner, they rose to the occasion. And I must say, were it not for their fortitude, their strength, and also their ability to take on a tremendous pressure, that they helped India and to themselves become a new nation. In the Western theatre, it was mainly a defensive battle that was fought. And it was an offensive defense in certain areas. In some places it went wrong, like in Chamjordia, because here an offensive was planned, and at the last moment, within about 24 hours of it actually going across the border, the orders were changed. And then Pakistan took the advantage and rolled up the Indian army up to the Manawar Tawi. There were small penetrations on both sides in the plain sector, but in the desert sector, the offensive by Pakistan went incredibly wrong. And at the same time, the Indian offensive went deep into Pakistan in the desert. A special mention has to be made about the war in the East. The war started in a different manner altogether. It was to assist the East Pakistan people, who were later called the Bangladeshis, to assert themselves against those who were oppressing them. It meant arming them, it meant training them, and later ensuring that a cordon was put around the entire area of what is now Bangladesh. It has to be remembered that the terrain was extremely difficult, and at the start, as quite often happens, the Indian armed forces used a conventional approach to an offensive, going for the hard points. But slowly, with the information given by the Bangladeshis themselves, the intelligence fed by them, they began to realize that it was not necessary to hit at the hard points, but to go around them. A great operational commander, a field commander, Lieutenant General Sardar Singh, was the one who put all this to test. It is he who, seeing an opportunity of crossing a very wide river, 2 miles or over that wide, decided to heli-land troops beyond it. And then the race to Dhaka began. He too initially started in a conventional manner, but it is because he was a field commander, always going ahead, carrying out reconnaissance, looking for weak spots, and he found one, and he leapt across the river with his troops, and then it was all but over for the East Pakistanis and for General Niazi, who was commanding the eastern forces in what is now Bangladesh. It would never have happened because the initial objectives of the Indian Army were not Dhaka at all. They were limited. But it is this action that allowed India and its forces to threaten Dhaka and for the forces in East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, to capitulate. We have enjoyed putting together this virtual presentation for you in the form of stories, because what we found is history can be got from history books, but personal examples, personal feelings can only be portrayed in stories, and stories live longer than history. History is at times forgotten, but stories and myths that come down to us through the ages are always remembered. I hope you'll enjoy this edition. This is the 5th edition of the Military Literature Festival, which started in Chandigarh 5 years ago. And there will be 4 evenings of this virtual interaction. Today, that is on the 11th and 12th, and then again on the 18th and 19th. Enjoy yourselves and welcome once again to the Military Literature Festival of Chandigarh.
Before we commence the proceedings for the day, we take a moment to express deep condolences to the families of the 13 soldiers on board the ill-fated flight which crashed near Coonoor on the 8th of December 2021. We pray that their souls rest in peace and fortitude to their families.
We also take this opportunity to remember our friend and my co-anchor at the previous editions of the MLF, Major Bikramjit Kamarpal, fondly known as Biz, who died earlier this year due to COVID. We miss you, Biz. Rest in peace, my friend.
One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7.
Up.
We now begin the proceedings for the day. First on agenda is the prelude to the 1971 war, all from the horse's mouth. We have with us first-hand accounts by Lieutenant General Dipinder Singh, Brigadier Sukhjit Singh, and Mr. S.S. Boparai, IAS. Lieutenant General Dipinder Singh, PVSM VSM, born 1930, was the overall commander of the IPKF in Sri Lanka from 1987 to 1990. He was the military assistant to General Sam Manekshaw from 69 to 73 during the Indo-Pak War of 1971.
Brigadier Sukhjit Singh served with the Sindh Horse. He was awarded the Mahavir Chakra for his leadership and courage in the face of the enemy during the Battle of Basantar in the Indo-Pakistan War of 1971.
Mr. S.S. Boparai, IAS, he served as Deputy Commissioner Firozpur, Punjab from 1971 to 75. He was at Fazilka when the war started and provided crucial support for first 2 days during the critical phase of Fazilka battle. Mr. Boparai has been decorated with the Kirti Chakra and a Padma Shri.
26th of March 1971 was a day like any other. I was at that time military assistant to the Chief of Army Staff. And I got up in a very leisurely fashion time because my boss, the Army Chief, was going to Bombay and returning the next day. However, by the time I got to office, reports had started coming in of the crackdown by Pakistan in what was at that time East Pakistan. During the rest of my talk, I refer to this area that used to be known as East Pakistan in Bangladesh. So the Bangladesh came into today. So I rang up the Army Chief in Bombay to apprise him of what had happened. And he said that he'd be starting back in the evening. Which is a good thing he did, because a little while later we got a message from PM's office saying that the PM was in Calcutta, had heard about this violence in Bangladesh, and she was also starting back to Delhi, and she'd like to be briefed in our operations room at 10 p.m. So fast forward to 10 p.m. and PM arrived in South Block, received by the Army Chief who had come in earlier from Norway, brought to the operation room, introduced to everyone that was there, very few, and she asked the Army Chief to brief her. So he got up and he made mention that normally the army has to be ready to go to war at very short notice. But in this case, they had taken a few liberties because of the elections in various states in the northeast, Bengal, Assam, and so on. And most of our formations were out at that time on election day. So the elections duties had been given to the army by the government, and the army had complied and sent formations over to help states ensure that the elections were held in a fair and prompt manner. So having told her this, he came and sat down next to her, and she said, the situation is very dire, I am under a lot of pressure to act immediately to help the Bangladeshis. So what can we do? So the answer was from the Army Chief that you haven't allowed me to employ or enroll any badbashis in my army. And so there's nothing I can do at the moment. She then spoke to him again. They were whispering to each other. We couldn't hear what was being said. But anyway, after a little while, she smiled at everyone, got up, and she said, "Thank you to the chief," and walked out, escorted by the Army Chief. The next few days were pretty hectic, reports coming in, but the great advantage we enjoyed, we learned then that we were going to also enjoy further, was that there were any number of Bangladeshi officers in the Pakistan army who were defecting and coming over to our troops and bringing with them a wealth of information. Intelligence-wise, the 1971 war was an absolute gold mine of information that we got from these people who left their posts, whatever they were occupying in the Pakistan army, and walked over to our side to give us all the information that we could want. A couple of days later, there was a call from the PM's office asking for the chief to attend a meeting of the cabinet in Parliament House. So the chief went over, attended that meeting, and later on he was telling us that it started with the PM asking each minister what his or her views were about the Pakistan blackout. Without exception, each one of them, the ministers that is, gave out alarming pictures of the number of refugees coming in, the mayhem which the Pakistan army was creating in Bangladesh, and ending up by saying that we must do something right away. Finally, she comes to the chief and his first comment was that, "Thank you, Prime Minister, for asking me. For one moment I thought that you were going to play Hamlet without the prince." So that was the ripple of laughter. And then he went on to explain our dispositions, which were widely separated at that time, dispersed at that time, and because of the election. And he said that it's going to take some time for these formations to come back to their parent occupations, re-equip, reintegrate with whoever has been left behind, and then proceed to the areas from where they were to commence operations. Secondly, with the rains about a month away, because in the east the rains start in early June, late May. He said that by the time we commence operation, the rains would have set in and life would be very difficult for the attacker and made incredibly easy for the defender, that is Pakistan. Then he started asking each minister, like he started with the defense minister, that I've been asking for more tanks, I've been asking for more guns, I've been asking for equipment. Then he asks, he says, "Do you realize that most of my soldiers haven't even got the pull-through to clean their rifles? They have to borrow from each other." And like that, he addressed most of the ministers about road communications, rail communications, clothing, winter clothing, and things like that. Then he says The routes through the mountains, through the Himalayas, will be opening shortly. The snow getting cleared, things like that. And the result will be that we will also be faced with the Chinese threat, for which we will not be ready at the moment. Then finally, he tells the Prime Minister that if today we start operations, the world will assume that it is an Indo-Pak war. We are the aggressors because we started, and we are interfering in the internal affairs of Pakistan. So for all these reasons, if you want to start operations today, I can guarantee to you that there will be a defeat. If on the other hand, you allow me time to reorganize, re-equip, move, and get the various axes that we want to move on ready for operating, I can guarantee a victory. He had also mentioned earlier that if we attack at that time, immediately, there is only one axis available from Calcutta to Dhaka. He said militarily that is not at all a sound proposition. We must have at least two more axes of attack. So the two axes suggested by him, one was from Agartala, Tripura, and the other was from Shillong, the Khasi Hills. So he sat down and waited for the Prime Minister to give her decision. So her decision was, she asked all the ministers that I've heard both sides, give me some time to decide, and you'll have my orders a little later. The ministers find out when to wait. The chief got up, went up to her table, and said, Prime Minister, would you like me to resign? I can do that on grounds of mental health or something. So she laughed and she said, Sam, of course not. You're absolutely right. And we will give you time, and you can take all the time that you want. When you are ready, let me know, and we will then commence operations. So that finished that, and we got all the time that we wanted to re-equip, reorganize, make sure that all the axes that we are going to use are ready. The hills will be blocked again, and with snow to deny the Chinese ingress. And he started then asking for the equipment that had been asked for earlier and not supplied to us. I want to make a brief mention here because lately there have been many cases of alleged corruption in importing military equipment. How did things work out those days? A meeting of secretaries would be called to decide on imports or acquisitions. He would walk in, wish them the time of the day, and start by saying that I've just been to the Prime Minister, I've got her approval to import 100 tanks, 100 guns, whatever it was that he was looking for. And it is from so-and-so government. I now leave you to work out the details. I'll check with you after 1 week. And I want all this equipment here within 1 month. Thank you. A very good morning to you all. And he would walk out. Knowing that nobody dared go to the Prime Minister to check, have you given orders or your assent to whatever the Field Master is asking? Which of course he had. I mean, there was never any question of him asking for something off the cuff. He would check with the secretaries after a week, what is the progress? If he was unhappy, he'd tell them that without pulling any punches. And in the time frame that he had given earlier, the equipment would be in our hands and they would start distributing to the regiments, battalions, whatever. So the space of re-equipping, reorganizing, carried on apace, and with it, all the formation bundles record, given the orders of where they would be operating from, which command they would be working under, what their objectives were going to be, what resources they would have, what reserves were available to meet their requirements if reserves were needed. And you would end by saying that I don't want to repeat of 65, where formations were just moved on whim and fancy. You have your orders, discuss your plans. If there are any doubts, come and sort them out with me. But once operations start, don't look back and ask for no reinforcements or whatever, because they will not be there. Another thing he highlighted always was that there will be no sacking during operation. Everyone is doing their job for the first time. Mistakes are inevitable, but don't repeat that mistake. Once you've made it, forgiven. Second time, there will be the axe. After that, he started going around to formations. The broad strategy was an attack into East Pakistan, Bangladesh, and holding operations in the West. Because he said if we go on to the offensive in the West, we lose our credibility. And what people will think that they came to us, that they are acting in an offensive manner, but here they are taking offensive action. So, all the plans made out, rehearsed, whatever the formation commanders wanted, their requirements fully met. His visits to formation units, to buck them up, all finished. And finally, the first week of December, the three service chiefs met and wanted to know what should be the D-Day and the HR. So the 4th of December, early morning, was decided to be the day when we would commence operations against Bangladesh, against East Pakistan. Now this was kept a very closely guarded secret. It was only between the chief and the other two chiefs and the Prime Minister. Strangely, people would be very astonished to hear that now. The Defence Minister, Jagjeevan Rao and the time, was not in the picture about when we would commence operations. Nor was he told. He was away in Bangalore, and on the second, I was given the job of giving to an elder who went to Bangalore, flew to Bangalore, to wait there, and during the night, third, fourth, to give to the Raksha Mantri, the Defence Minister, his letter from the chief saying that I have just been ordered by the Prime Minister to commence operations. You are not here, so I have given this to the orders and we will be commencing operations. We would like you to be back in Delhi to guide us towards them. Gets into his car, puts the side glasses down, into glasses, takes a drive up to Parliament alone and back, then changes into a lounge suit and goes off to the overalls for it. There were many raised eyebrows at that time in the overall hotel when they see him there, knowing that we've been attacked in various places. But with a breezy, we look after them sort of announcement, he carried on, attended his party and came back. I might mention here that during the 16 days of war, 13 days of war, not on a single occasion did we have the Prime Minister or the Defence Minister question any action that had been ordered by the chief. Instead, it was always from both of them, what can we do for you? So naturally, when so much trust is placed on the shoulders of a man, it becomes his bounden duty to make sure that only the best results are produced and given to the country.
Good evening. I'm Brigadier Sukhjit Singh, a retired Indian Army Armoured Corps officer who had been privileged to command an Indian Armoured Corps regiment in 1971 during the Indo-Pakistan conflict of 1971. I'll start at the beginning of 1971, in approximately February or March. I would put it really as the first week of March, I think, when I was then posted to Army Headquarters in the Military Operations Directorate, responsible for the planning and conduct of military operations. I was in the assignment of a Grade 2 Staff Officer, which is who operates under a Grade 1 Staff Officer and has a Grade 3 Staff Officer to assist. At that time, my directorate in which I was serving was looking after the Eastern Theatre. And my G1 or Grade 1 Staff Officer, who was my senior, was from the Grenadier Regiment, a very fine officer, Lieutenant Colonel Rai Singh, who'd won his MVC in Sikkim earlier on. came during the confrontation with the PLA of the Chinese army. We were summoned that morning, the early part of, I think it was March, by the Director of Military Operations.